We're going to get started today then on chapter 4 in the book, which is editing and combining shapes and paths. So last week in chapter 3 we did a lot with shapes. We were working with basic shapes and kind of learning how we can make squares and rounded corners and things like that. Today we're going to learn how to use some tools to actually cut shapes to open them up. So a scissors tool, a knife tool. We're then going to learn how to join paths. So if we cut something open, how do we rejoin it or join it in a new way? Outline strokes, we're going to work with the eraser tool. There's a new tool called the Shape Builder, which is dangerously similar to the Shaper that we did last week. The Shaper tool is that one that works really well on touch screens, where you would draw like with a pen, because I've seen you using that. Or when we get out the Wacom drawing tablets where you use a pen and you freehand draw a rectangle really sloppy, but it turns it into a nice rectangle. And then you can squiggle over it to erase or to combine paths with a squiggle movement. That's the Shaper. Shape Builder is similar, but not that loosey-goosey chicken scratching. That's about it. So what we need to do is go get the files that we need. So wherever you have your book files stored, go into that file. So Illustrator book files, lesson 4, and we need the start file. And if you can see all of your artboards in the window, anybody tell me how many total artboards we have here? Without counting, there's a way to look. 10, yep. If you go down to this bottom artboard drop thing, you'll see that there are 10 of them, and they have given a name to each one of them. Poster, window, tank, tent, whatever. You also see at the far right, we have some art that's not on an artboard, it's just sitting there waiting to be used. So if we were to print this out, we'd get 10 different pages, and this fire over here on the far right would not show up. Before we get going, let's do a file, save as, and call it Your Name Happy Camper. And let it stay in that lesson 4 folder. All right, first thing we're going to do is edit shapes and paths, and we're going to do that. There's lots of ways that we can combine shapes. Good grab. We can combine shapes and make something easier. So if you're still looking at this full view, you can see this little cute little camper here. We could have drawn that with a pen tool, which we're going to learn in a couple of weeks, where it's all just one big curve. But another way of doing it was a circle and then a rectangle down here and then just one arch between them, or the top of a circle. So there's easier ways to build complex shapes using this shape builder. All right, first thing we're going to do is work with the scissor tool, but we're going to work on artboard number 2. So go down to the bottom, choose artboard 2. We see our starting file over here, and this is what it's going to look like when we're done. So it just kind of warns you how we're going to make it look. So let's zoom in on the starting file, which is the one over here on the right. And if you want to see the final, like to know what we're getting at, you can still have that visible, or you can just zoom in completely on this one. All right, we're going to take our selection tool, which is the black arrow, and we're going to click on this white shape in the center to select it. If you look at your properties panel, you see that it is a shape. It has a width and a height, it's filled with white, and it has a black 1-point stroke around it. So it's not that it's empty, it's actually filled with white, and we can see that over here. Ooh, I've got a bug running across my book. Jeez. You're going to want to zoom in a little bit on this image so that you can really see and do some detail work on it. So do zoom in now and make sure that your shape is still selected, and we're going to go find the scissor tool. And I'll make my tools just one single line here. It is nested under the eraser tool, which is about halfway down. And if you click and hold on that, you'll see that it's eraser and the scissors tool. Those are the two different tools. grab the scissor tool, have it changed to be the scissors, and we're going to take our cursor over this path at the bottom of our rectangle, and we're going to be somewhere over on the left, about 1/4 of the way in, somewhere in there on the path. And when we see the word path show up with our cursor, we're going to click once. And real quickly, I had a gray box show up that says shape expanded. That's good. Any cuts made with the scissors tool have to be on a line or a curve, not on an endpoint, because that already exists. We're making an endpoint. We're going to switch to our direct selection tool, the white arrow, and we're going to move it over that blue spot that we just made, and we're going to drag it up, kitty corner like this. So remember, I told you early on that sometimes you're going to see weird fills and you can't quite figure out what's going on. Underneath this is a bigger rectangle that's this yellowy gold color. When we cut this, it knows it has to have a white fill, so it makes an imaginary line between the two open points. That's why we have that weird look, and we can now see inside there. So did everybody have luck doing that? Cutting and dragging it up? Okay, perfect. All right, now we're going to grab this other anchor point, the one that's left down here, and we're going to drag it up and over on this side. So we're making curtains, basically, is what we're doing. Okay, so if you want to change those a little bit. So we made a cut, and then we took those two endpoints and we dragged them up to different spots. The stroke doesn't go all the way around. This is an open path. It starts here and it ends over here. This white fill-in is just because to make the fill, it has to create that imaginary last line. All right. Now we can join paths. So let's pretend that we were to draw a U shape. So it's open on the top. Yep. Okay. Okay. The direct selection tool, you have to get that. And then click on that anchor point and drag it up into the right. Click away because right now you have all four of them selected. So click away to deselect and now just select that one anchor point. And now click up into the right. Yep. I noticed that you had all four of your corners were blue, not white, meaning all four were selected. That's why it was moving the whole unit, even though you were in the direct selection tool. You had more than one anchor point selected. Okay, so to join paths, if you made a U and you decided that you wanted to connect the top of that with a straight line, that's something you can do. All right, first thing we're going to do is switch to our selection tool, black arrow, and we're going to click away to deselect everything. So we have nothing highlighted. Now we're going to come in and click on the white fill, and we're going to select the whole entire shape, not just an anchor point or two. It was important that we did that we clicked away and clicked back with this tool because previously only one anchor point was selected and we want the whole shape selected. All right, by selecting the whole path, when we tell it to do this join command, Illustrator is going to find the two ends of the path that are open and it's going to join them. So it's going to find this point and this point and it's going to join them. So under the Object drop-down menu, we're going to go to Path, and then join. Command J is the shortcut. That's fairly clear cut. And by doing that, it automatically joined those two open end paths. So when you apply this join command, if you do a Command J and you have a shape selected, Illustrator is first going to look for and join the paths that have endpoints located closest to each other. And then this process is repeated every time you do this join. So if we had a bunch of open, like say it was meant to be a circle, but we had 4 open slashes going around. The first time we told it to join, it would connect the two that were closest. The second time we said join, it would find 2 more, 2 more, 2 more, and eventually it would join them all. Okay, so you can keep doing join. All right, over in our properties panel with this shape selected, let's take off the stroke. You can either arrow down to 0 or in the swatch panel, you can pick no stroke. And then in our fill color, we're going to change it to be purple 3. So if you hover over these, you'll see their name show up. Or you could switch your view if you wanted to, because I'm in a small thumbnail. You could be in a large list view, and there it's super obvious which one is purple 3. So whatever view you are in here is up to you. The small thumbnail is the default. All right, so we just made curtains basically. Click away with your selection tool to deselect, and then marquee drag over all of these shapes to select all of them, and then we want to group them. There's the shortcut button down here and the quick actions on the right, or we could do object group. Where are you? Object group, or Command G is the shortcut. So I would say for speed, Command G or clicking on the group button over here is going to be the fastest workflow. Deselect, and we can save that. We're done with that first demo. All right. Let's switch. Everybody good? Okay, switch to artboard number 3. And what we're going to make is a little like LP gas tank for our camper. And the pieces that they've started us with are in front of us. And how do we get to this final point over here? How do we colorize the top half of this in kind of a non-uniform way, this wavy version? We're going to use the knife to do this, not the scissor. So with our selection tool, we're going to click on this pink oval over here on the left under the start file to select it. And the key to using the knife tool is if you select an object first and use the knife tool on it, it will only cut it. If you have nothing selected on your artboard and you go in with the knife tool, it's going to cut anything and everything it crosses. Okay, so most likely you want to select the object first. Knife tool may or may not be in your toolbar. I'm guessing not, because we now have these 3 dots at the bottom that are more tools. And when we click on that, we can see all the things that are option that we're just not, they're available, but they're not in our actual toolbar yet. So somewhere in here, there, whoops, where did you go? I saw you. The knife tool is in the modify clump. So it's quite a ways down on my example. We're going to just drag this into our toolbar. I'm going to put it up by in between the scissor and the shape builder tool, just so that it's in the same area. If you get that blue line, it's going to place it between the tool above and below it. If the whole tool lights up, it's going to nest it inside there. Once you've done that, you can hit escape to get rid of that pop-up menu. Select your knife tool, bring it over to the left side of this shape, and we're going to drag across to cut it in 2. And what you notice is that it's probably not a straight line. It's kind of willy-nilly however you're drawing across. So if you don't like it, Command Z to undo it, and then come back and do it again. Notice it put anchor points left and right, and it actually cut this into 2 different positions. All right, take your selection tool, click away to deselect the whole thing, and then click to just select the shape on the top. Once we've done that, we're going to fill it with a lighter color of pink. So go to your fill and fill that with pink. Then take your selection tool and click on the square up at the top and just drag that down to position it on top of your little gas tank, like matching the one on the right. Once we've done that, ultimately we're going to take all these pieces and put them on another artboard with a camper. So we don't want to grab it and only take the square part. We want to click on it and take the whole unit. So we're going to marquee select all of it, and we're going to group it. Command G, or come over to the right hand side and click on group. So that was using the knife tool to just freeform go across and kind of get a wavy line and cut things. We can also use it to make straight lines. Switch to artboard 4. Oops, that's 5. Artboard 4 is the tent. And if you look over on the right, you can see the final version. So right now in front of the tent, we have a dark pink triangle with a light pink triangle on top of it. And we're going to use the knife tool to do some cutting and make this yellow space, kind of like this part of the tent is rolled back and we can see inside the tent. So knowing what you're going to do by looking at it over here on the right, let's focus in on the artboard or the tent on the left. Take your selection tool and click on the smaller pink triangle, the one in front. We are going to need to make some kind of precision cuts on this, so you might want to zoom in so that it's easier to work with this. We're going to take the knife tool again, and we're going to come up to this top point in our triangle. We're going to hover right over that with our knife. And right now your cursor probably has a knife and an arrow, correct? If we hit our caps lock button, our cursor changes to a crosshair, which is more precise. So for now, we're still in the knife tool, whoops, but we want to put that crosshair right over that top anchor point to know that we're exactly there. Whenever you hit caps lock with a tool, you get a more precise tool if the original tool is like a drawing of what it is. All right. We are going to hold Option and Shift as we drag down from here, and we're going to come straight down. Shift, and when we get to the bottom of the tent, let go of your mouse first and then your two keys. Shift holds it straight. So we have a nice straight cut. Then we're going to go back up to that same point, and we're just going to hold the Option key, and we're going to cut in another straight line, but it's going to be a little bit more diagonal, and we're going to come down and let go. So holding the Option key keeps it straightish. It's not going to get wavy. The Shift key keeps it constrained to like 45-degree angles or 15-degree angles. All right, take your selection tool and whoops, click away from everything, and then come back and try to click on this piece in here. I'm not sure if I have it or not, to be honest. We'll see. I'm going to change the fill color to yellow, and I'll see if I selected the right piece. I did not. As I'm looking, I'm not sure I got precise enough up here at the top to make this work. Yeah, look at that. Now that I'm zoomed in, I have terrible triangles up here. Can you guys see that on my screen? Let me zoom in. None of them are at the top. Oops. All right, how about if we undo a few times? All right, I'll try that again. If you had luck with that, good job. All right, I'm going to go right there, Option Shift, and I'm going to drag straight down somewhere. Now I'm too far zoomed out. Oops, slow down. Okay, and I'm going to try that again. See if I can do this right this time. Option. Tell that to be yellow. There we go. So I didn't have a good selection at the top to make that work. So basically oh, that's still not right. I still grabbed the wrong piece. Just want this piece.
It seems like it'd be easy to use the polygon tool to make the triangle part.
You would think, but yes, if you're building it from scratch, there's easier ways, but what I'm trying to demonstrate is how these cutting tools work. And even though they've worked for me every other time I've used them, I'm doing a crap job today. Anybody get that to work? It's really not that hard. It's worked for me every other time I've done it. Yay, yay. All right. It should just be this small triangle here that's getting filled with yellow, but evidently I did a poor cut yet again. Whatever. Again, if you're drawing it, you make a great point. If you're drawing this from scratch, you maybe just put a triangle on top. Make a polygon tool and make another triangle on top. You don't necessarily cut them out. That's how the knife tool should work. Let's zoom out a little bit and marquee around the whole tent that's here and group it together. All right, let's move on to Artboard 5. And we are going to make this shape. So ultimately, we're going to take this rectangle and we're going to shave it down into a shape that has rounded edges and looks like a piece of this plant. All right, we're going to be working on this piece on the right-hand side. So, by the way, turn caps lock off so that you're not in those precise tools anymore. And then come over and click with your selection tool on what looks like a rectangle. And tell me if it is a rectangle. No. Right. It's a stroke. It's a straight line that happens to have a really wide stroke on it. How wide?
20 points.
20 points. Yep. We look over here. There's no fill. It's a stroke with 20 point around it. So we talked about that earlier in one of our last two classes, where you can also do this. You can draw a line, put a fixed stroke on it, and then if you change your mind and want it to be a shape, you can give it a command to turn it into a shape also. All right, which is what we are going to do. We're going to turn it into a shape. So object, path, and then we're going to say, outline stroke. So instead of being a stroke, we want it to outline into a shape. Now it's turned into a rectangle with a purple fill and no stroke at all. Okay. It's a closed path. Drag it down into position on this plant type thing down here below. And leave that shape selected. We're going to use the eraser tool to erase off edges of it to make it look similar to the other pieces in this plant. So the eraser tool lets you erase any area of your vector artwork regardless of the structure. You can use it on paths, compound paths, paths inside live paint groups, and clipping content, which we'll get to. Whatever artwork you select is the only artwork you're going to erase. So if we get messy with our eraser, we're not going to affect any of these other pieces because we have this one selected. If nothing is selected and we use the eraser, it erases whatever it touches. All right, so we need to go back and grab the eraser, which is nested underneath the scissor tool. So go back and get your eraser. And to set up the details of the eraser tool, we're going to actually double click on it in the toolbar. So double click on the eraser and you get this floating window. Here's where it tells you where you get to set up how the eraser works. So angle, you guys can think about the eraser. The eraser on a pencil. Straight up and down is the angle, or are you holding it like this? So that's literally the way you're holding the eraser. How round it is, and what size it is. Those are the different things that we can change here. We're going to change it to be a 20-point eraser, which is just bigger. And again, that's something that you probably do visually. You don't know the number and jump into here and say that. And then we're going to say, okay, so we just made it bigger. Notice that my cursor is bigger. I could have done that with my left and right bracket keys too. So I can make it bigger or smaller that way, or I can double click on the tool and tell it to be 20 points. All right. We're going to go above this purple shape, and we're going to just kind of come down and around and make it look like that. And then when we let go, it only erases the shape that we have. And then we're going to do the same on the other side. So If you wanted to be super precise, this is kind of hard to do, to be honest. But do your best to kind of mold it into the shape you see on the screen. And notice it now has anchor points. If we look at them, these anchor points are actually curves. They're not hard lines anymore. They're not right angles. When you are happy with it, take the selection tool, marquee across it all, and group it into one object. And deselect, and let's save our file. So we've made a bunch of different things so far. All right, let's jump to Artboard 6, which is the car. And we can see here what we're going to be doing to it. The finished product has 2 doors, front door and a back door, and you can see the color of the van behind it. On the one we're working on, it's just one big lump of a door. Zoom in on the one that we're going to be working on, the one on the left. Take your selection tool and click on this dark pink rectangle that is the 2 doors. We're going to go back to our eraser tool. We're going to double click on it to change the size and shape. We're going to go a lot smaller. Instead of 20 points, we're going to tell it to be 5 points. And then click to say OK. Notice our cursor is a lot smaller now. Again, you could have done that with the bracket keys instead. So with this pink shape selected and our eraser at 5 points, we're going to erase right down between these 2 doors, but we don't want it to be sloppy and wavy. So the modifier key that always keeps things in a straight line is what? Shift. Yay. So take your eraser key, go in between the 2, hold Shift, and come straight down. And when you let go, it has cut through those 2 pieces and made 2 doors instead of one big one. Take your selection tool and marquee select the whole thing and group it. And we're done with that artboard as well. Let's go to number 7, artboard 7, the wheel. And let's just look at our start and our final. If you were drawing this from scratch in real life, what's the easiest way to get to this final point? How many shapes do you draw and stack?
3.
3. Big black circle, slightly smaller gray circle, another black circle, and you center them perfectly. However, the starting pieces that we are given are not that way. We have a big black circle, a gray circle, and then an outline. Compound paths, I want you to think of them as the donut tool or the stamp out cutout tool. We're actually going to use this shape, this white stroke or black stroke on the white, to make a hole in the gray shape so that we can see through it to the black underneath. Okay, we're going to make a donut out of it. So let's zoom in on this side over here. So we have our 3 pieces on the start side. We're going to use our selection tool and we're going to pick our gray circle and we're going to drag it so that it's here over top of our black circle. If your smart guides are turned on, you should see the intersect point when you know that you're at the halfway, or when you know that you're dead center. So bring it in, center it using your smart guides. Oh, I lied. I have to show you something first. That's ultimately what we're doing. Just do it so that it overlaps. This is the first demo, my bad. Just overlap the black one. Okay, now go get this white shape and center this one on the gray. With that white circle selected, hold down Shift and select the gray circle as well. So both of those 2 shapes are selected. And now we're going to tell it to make that compound path, which is like a cutout or a donut. So we're going to say object, compound path, way down, make. And it cut it out. And you can see through to the white background, and you can see through to the black underneath it. So it's basically a punch. Now we're going to take this shape and we're going to bring it over on top of our black shape and center it there. And let's just make sure that this is in the right stacking order. It is, because we can see it, but it's always, if you can't see it, or if when we click away we lose it, it's just a stacking order issue. So we would do object, arrange, bring to front, if for any reason that gray shape wasn't showing. So the shape that you have on top punches out a hole underneath it of the other shape when you do that. Okay. All right, drag across all of these and group them. All right, next section, let's go to Artboard 8, which is the trailer. You can see all these funny shapes that we're starting with and where we're going to finish. So combining shapes. Creating more complex shapes from simpler shapes sometimes is easier than, like I said, using the pen tool, which we haven't learned yet, and drawing this originally. Sometimes it's easier to just make a rectangle and a circle, and here's another circle, but you know, 3/4 of it is missing. It's just this top 1/4 piece of the pie. We're going to work with the Shape Builder, and I want you to remember this is not the Shaper tool that we used last week. Okay, the Shaper is this one up here that looks like a messy circle with a pencil next to it. It's because you draw it out kind of by hand and it turns it into a good circle, and then you use squiggles to erase or squiggles to combine. The Shape Builder is down a few more tools. In my case, it's under where I put the knife. And the Shape Builder looks like two perfectly made circles with a dashed line connecting them and going to merge them. So Shape Builder tool is different. This tool, very much like that one, just functions a little differently, but it allows you to merge, delete, fill, and edit overlapping shapes and paths. All right, we're going to be focusing on this side of the artboard on the trailer over here. Take your selection tool and we're going to drag a marquee across 3 shapes, but not getting the white wheel circle. So we're going to start up here and we're going to marquee down to get these 3 shapes. Remember, you just have to touch a piece of them to select them. You don't have to encompass them all in your marquee selection. So that got the rectangle, the circle, and the quarter circle, but it left out the wheel circle down here. In order to use this Shape Builder tool, you have to select the shapes first. So we had to select all 3 of those before we go into Shape Builder tool. All right, grab that tool. The Shape Builder tool is over here. And once we click on it, we're going to bring our cursor off the left edge. And notice when I float around, it starts lighting up these pieces. Okay? You know you're in the Shape Builder when you see that. We're going to drag from outside across this piece and this piece to combine the 2 of them. Okay, see how that worked? All right, we're now going to move off the upper left edge and we're going to get all the shapes except for this weird rectangle like bumper in the back. So we're going to come up here and we're going to do, hold on, that was bad. That did not work. We're going to hold Shift when we do this, and we're going to drag down like this. That got all of those pieces merged together, and I missed that one in the front. There we go. So you should have everything, not the wheel, and not that little back bumper piece. So by default, this Shape Builder, do you see how I have a plus next to my cursor? It's always adding and putting things together. So if we want to take away, we need to do that. We're going to use a modifier key, which is Option. And now notice that we have the minus sign. That means we can take away. With that held down, with the Option held down, we're going to click on this far left shape that's like the back bumper to delete it. All right. Switch back to your selection tool. Deselect everything. We're now going to drag across that larger shape that we combined and the purple bar at the bottom and the white circle to get all three shapes. So we're going to leave out like the hitch basically. So we're going to marquee select these pieces. Then we're going to go back to our shape builder tool now that we've selected the pieces. We're going to move our cursor below the white circle or the tire. We're going to hold down Option and we're going to drag up through the white circle but stopping before the top of it. So we're going to drag up but stop before we get to the top of it. Keep going up, just not outside the black line. Yep, and that's going to remove that. Click away to deselect. Take your selection tool and we're going to click on the edge of this larger shape to select just it. And we're going to fill it with red color 1, red 1. Which actually looks kind of like a dark pink. And we're going to take away the stroke. And then we're going to drag across and we're going to group this combination of shapes and click on the group icon. And then click away and we'll do a file save before we move on. All right, let's go to Artboard 9. And you can see the shapes that ultimately are making this door. And you can see that the circle at the top is not quite nested down right to get to that point. So there's some work we need to do. We're going to use something called Pathfinder effects now. Pathfinder effects are found in the Properties panel. They're another way to combine shapes. But when we do this, using the Pathfinder effects, the object is permanently changed. So in the past, we've been able to merge the circle and the rectangle, and then if it wasn't positioned right, we could go into like isolation mode and still select the two shapes and tweak them a little bit. Using Pathfinder mode, the way we're going to do it first is a permanent deal. The minute you tell it to do it, it turns into this one shape. And in this case, if we did it, it would be awkward, right? That circle isn't down low enough. So it would be a permanent move using Pathfinder. All right. Make sure that you can see this artboard over here on the right that we're going to be working on. And with our selection tool, we're going to drag across the circle and the rectangle to get both of those shapes, but nothing else. So we're just going to do a little marquee over here, and that's going to grab both of those two shapes without getting the purple or the doorknob. With the shape selected, we're going to go over to our Properties panel on the right, and down towards the bottom, we have the thing called Pathfinder. And if you hover over those icons, you're going to see Unite, click to minus the front shape, click to just select the intersecting spots where the two overlap, or click to basically knock out where the two overlap. Those are the four options in the Pathfinder. We're going to click on the Unite. See what happened? It united them permanently. We don't see that shape again, and it's screwed up. So unless you're confident that your shape is ready to be united permanently, don't do that. But if you are, it's a great option. Let's do a Command Z to undo that. And we're going to hold a modifier key to make this work, but to still keep it editable. We're still going to use Pathfinder, but we're going to be able to edit our shapes if we want to. So when our shapes are selected, we're going to hold Option when we do this, and it's going to make a compound path, a compound shape, two shapes, rather than one simple path. So the original underlying objects are still preserved and we can edit them. So with those two shapes selected, go back to Pathfinder, but instead of clicking directly, hold Option and click on Unite. Notice how they look united, but those two shapes are still there. Click away to deselect. And with our selection tool, we're going to double click on this black stroke of our new shape. And by double clicking, we're going to go into isolation mode. So everything else is grayed out, but those two shapes. And we can see up in our gray bar up here that we have, we're down in isolation mode. So now we can hover over and still see those two different shapes. We're going to click on the edge of the circle to select it. And we're going to drag it straight down from the blue dot in the center. That's where we're going to hang on to drag it down. We're going to drag holding the Shift key to keep it perfectly in line. And we're going to drag it down until we see that it is aligned with the top of the rectangle. So the smart guides are going to show that we're perfectly aligned. That way only the top half of our circle is showing. To get out of this isolation mode, we hit Escape. And now we have the shape that we want. It's still in two editable forms that we can tweak, but we want to now expand it and make it one single path that we can't edit again. We're happy with where it is. So that's called expanding. It's going to keep this shape, but it's going to no longer be editable. Click away to deselect. Click on the shape to select it as a whole again. And we're going to say Object, Expand, where are you? There you are. Expand Appearance, the top third of our options. Now those two shapes are gone. It's just one path with a curve at the top. It's now permanent. It's now a single shape. Change our fill color to pink and take off the stroke. And then click away to deselect. And then marquee select all of the pieces and group it. And we're done with the door. All right, let's go to Artboard 10. Nope, I lied. Let's go to Command Option 0 to see all of our artboards. And we are going to build the trailer. So we're going to zoom in our view. If you want to take your zoom tool, the area that we want to be able to see is the trailer and then these four artboards to the left of it. So we want to be able to see our window, wheel, gas tank, and door, and we're going to assemble the trailer just using the selection tool. So the window's going to come over here, the wheel's going to come in here, our gas tank is going to sit on this front hitch, and our door is going to come over here. So build yourself a cute little trailer. And when you are done, marquee select the whole trailer that you just built and group that so we can use that later as well. When you are done with that, switch to Artboard 10, and we're going to look at a flame. And believe it or not, we're going to take this one stroke over here on the left. If you select it, you'll see that that's all it is. It's a stroke or a line, a path. It is not a shape. And we are going to manipulate that to look like this. And I can tell you that manipulating a straight line to look like this is actually a lot easier until you know the pen tool very well. It's a lot easier than drawing the shape using curves and the pen tool. Once you know the pen tool, this will be fairly quick. But for now, this is way easier. So, reshaping a path. Make sure that this path is selected, and we can see that it's a 10-point pink stroke. And we're going to go and find a tool that probably is not on our toolbar on the left. So we're going to go down to those 3 dots again at the bottom. And we are going to look for the Reshape tool. It's this one right here under Modify. It kind of looks like a smiley face with an arrow underneath it. We are going to drag it onto the Rotate tool in our toolbar to nest it in that. The Rotate tool is right underneath the Text tool. It looks like a big circle going backwards. So take the Reshape tool, nest it in with our Rotate tool. Once you've done that, you can hit Escape to get that window to go away. And that new tool probably is the one that's selected right here. Okay, bring that tool, make sure it's active, and come over our path over here. And when you're hovering over the path, you can see that the cursor changes from being just an arrow to having a little box underneath it, or actually it's going to put an anchor point. When it changes to this anchor point, and let's do it up here in like the top 1/3 or the top quarter, when it changes to that new anchor point, click and drag out to the right to bend it. We're now going to move this top anchor point itself. We're going to click on that anchor point and just move it over as well. So we're just kind of bending it over a little bit. Notice that all 3 of these anchor points are lit up in blue, which means that when we're moving it, it's actually moving it as one big unit. All of the anchor points, it's adjusting the entire path. Okay, so you now have something of a bent line. The next tool we're going to use changes the width of a stroke, and it changes it in different areas. So right now we have a 10-point stroke on this path. What if we want it to be fatter here and thinner here? Can we do that? Amazingly, we can. So that's this cool thing where it's still just a stroke, but at different anchor points we're going to make it wider and thinner. So that 10 is not going to be uniform all the way across. All right, we need to use the Width tool to do this, and it's actually on our toolbar. It's right here. It's below the eyedropper. It's a very funny looking thing. So grab that and bring your cursor over, and we're going to put our cursor over the middle of the path. Notice when we're out in the white area, it just has like that tilde sign. But as we get to the path, it says plus, and it lights up a white anchor point on our actual path. All right, so at about the halfway point, when it turns into that plus with an anchor point, we're going to click and drag away to the right, and we're going to make it thicker at that point. You have a tooltip. Drag it out to be approximately 0.2 on both sides. So it's about that thick. So what we did was we created a variable width on a path. This is not a shape. All the outside is not highlighted. Click on a blank area to deselect your points. And when we come back over here and hover again over our path, the original one that we made lights up white, that halfway point, and we can make another one. You can start to see that. Hover over this original point again. And instead of leaving it there, we're going to drag it up or down. We're going to make that wide part be higher or lower on our path. Wherever you drag it to doesn't matter, because when you're done, we're going to do a Command Z to undo it and bring it back to that about center point. Okay, with the same tool, we're going to go up to our top anchor point. And when the pointer gets that wavy line next to it and we see the word anchor, we're going to double click on this point. And we're going to create a new width here specifically. We're going to type in 0. So the total width at this point is going to be 0. We're going to say OK, and that turned it into a sharp point. We're going to move down over the bottom anchor point and do the same thing. We're going to double click. We're going to tell our total width to be 0 and say OK. Go back to your original width point and notice that in the center we have a blue dot, but then we have 2 handles on the right and the left. Grab one of those white handles and pull on it, and you can make it wider yet if you want to, or more narrow, whatever works. Okay. So that's our original flame piece. Take your selection tool, click away to deselect, and then select it again. And we're going to make a copy and a paste of this. We're going to make a duplicate. So do an edit copy, which is Command C, and then edit paste, normal paste, which is Command V. With this second version, this copy selected, we're going to turn this into a shape instead of being a path. So we're going to say Object, Path, outline this stroke, turn it into a shape. We're going to scale this piece down. So to scale it proportionately from any one of these corner points, you have to hold the Shift key. So hold Shift and scale it down and make it smaller. And then kind of move it into position down here. We're now going to make a copy of this smaller one. So we're going to edit copy, which is Command C, edit paste, Command V. And then in our properties panel, up here in the transform section, we have all the measurements. And at the bottom right, we have triangles that say flip along the horizontal line or flip along the vertical axis. We're going to choose the first one, flip it around the horizontal, and that's just going to flip it so that it's going the other way. And we're going to drag this piece of flame up here. And we're going to click away, similar to this that they made over here. And we're going to marquee select all 3 pieces and group them so that they function as one. All right. Show everything on your artboard. So Command Option 0. And then to the right of your artboard, you have this campfire. So take the piece that you just made as a group and drag it up above the campfire like that, kind of hovering over both. I'll zoom in on that. Okay, bring it over like this. Then you want to click away and then marquee select all of this campfire, the flames, the logs, everything that are sitting out in the workspace, and group them. And click to deselect. And now your job is to take all of these finished pieces and make something similar to what you see at the bottom of your book on page 136. So it says Happy Camper, and you see the trailer and the Jeep and the campfire and the tent. So you're going to need to drag them over. You're probably going to need to scale them. So by holding the shift key and pulling on the corners, you can make them bigger or smaller as needed. So get them to go onto this document. And then hold up for just 1 second because this is important. I want you to take the type tool and in a color that's bright enough for me to see, so this pink or white is going to be good as your foreground color, come down here and click and type your name and make it big enough that we can see it. So put your name on it somewhere. And build yourself, whoops, make it so it's a color that we could see. Build this scene like you see at the bottom of page 136 and save the file and print it out. And we're going to be on a break from now until about 9:30, depending on how long this takes. So bring that printout up here and take a break whenever you're ready, and we'll reconvene at 9:30. The online students, I will have a Dropbox for you.